Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone out there. And it's time for another live session of Game Design Steve D, working our way through Empathy Engines by Elizabeth Sampat. Another, as I say, a very good book, very interesting, challenging book that keeps talking about um, how you design important games. It's very much a book about challenging you. First chapter about systems make statements. You cannot make a system without expressing some view or opinion or political statement about what is going on. You cannot really say that a system is neutral. It cannot be. Um, Chapter 2 is called Extinguishing Neutrality and goes into that more often. And it talks about the fact that we tend to think more people agree with us than don't. And That's called the false consensus problem. And it talks about how bias is going to happen. But it also has a really good line in here where is it? The only time a game is neutral is before a single decision about the game has been made. And that's really important because game design, here's the other really good quote. Every step of the game design process is about limiting possibility from an infinite number of paths and choices. And I think that's really important because that's one of the things that makes game design hard. Um, and it's one of the things that makes it hard to get started is that you have to immediately just make choices. And there's a line in that great film Wonder Boys with Michael Douglas and Robert Downey Jr. before Marvel, where he says writers make choices, and that's really what art is about. Ultimately, it's like cutting out possibilities, and in a sense, that's a tragedy to some extent. When you start, every time you put a line on paper, it's a very bold thing because you're saying this and not anything else, and that can be quite frightening, but it can also be quite exciting. But it is also a limitation, and games particularly are about limitation. There's another quote in here that says that a game is a series of restrictions entered into voluntarily, and that's a really good definition of a game. So yeah, so chapter 2 is about extinguishing neutrality, understanding that you have biases, that you have a point of view. Um, and There's another good quote here. I'm going to keep reading from this. Games, as because games are systems, they are often seen as cold and unfeeling, the opposite of emotional and provocative. However, systems are the building blocks of our society and have a human consciousness and the driving forces of our success and failures. Um, the proof that any simple system can evoke emotion is as simple as watching anyone stuck at an unusually long red light. Um, and so, um, yeah, part of fostering empathy with others and fostering empathy in others is understanding that you have a stance. And so the exercise in this chapter is to think about a game, about a facet of yourself that if it was designed by someone with a very different belief or background from you. It's a very good question and something that I found quite challenging at first, but also quite something that I reacted to very strongly because there are lots of things about me that I am constantly reminded um, are unacceptable to the powerful people in this world, the mainstream. I am differently abled. I'm neurodiverse. I am a gifted person. I am strange, and I'm leftist, and I believe really strongly in justice issues. And the longer you are alive, I have that moment of Frederick Douglass where he describes that you realize that everything in this world. It's a quote from that movie Grand Canyon. Everything in this world is different from how it's supposed to be, and that incredible itch inside me to make things better sucks, and it makes me constantly aware that everything around me is wrong, and it's a very, very exhausting existence. And I try, uh, probably against my better interest sometimes, to be aware of these forces and make others aware of them. So yes, I'm very much aware that there are people out there who want to kill me, want to destroy me, want to work against me. Um, um, and I know all about their points of view because they're often the loudest, most powerful people in our society. Some of them are President of the United States or Elon Musk. These are dangerous lunatics who violently disagree with me and have very different backgrounds. You know, they're rich, they're powerful, but there's also a lot of other people with very different backgrounds for other reasons as well. The second reason I struggle with this is I actually have a bit of trouble with this part of theory of mind. I'm really good at imagining lots of different ways that people can think, but not how they would think about me. And that comes to back what I talked about in that first episode of lacking that sense of perception of myself, and why I'm kind of a bit of a solipsist in that I feel it's very difficult for me to sort of feel that the universe is real and that I really exist in it. So imagining someone looking at me and judging me felt uncomfortable. It didn't want to be something I dwelt in. It also made me think, oh, hang on, no. I think this is also, again, why autistic people often have a very blind focus, because the word auto, self, there's a lot of focus on the self. There's no sense of the other. That's what really defines autism for a lot of people, and for me, that everything feels like it comes from within and not from without. And if you're thinking about Myers-Briggs, which has some elements of truth in it that come from Jungian things, that's sensing intuiting split. Autistic people tend to be very high end, very intuitive. Like, this is what I have seen and decided, and I do not look outside. So this was quite challenging for me, but I'm trying to get better at pushing through things that I find difficult. And so I thought about something that is very close to my heart. So I am an animal trainer, particularly a dog trainer. There is a huge revolution going on in dog training at the moment. It started actually in the 30 years ago in the 90s, but basically we're trying to move away from ever using aversive methods, which is adding negative stimulus to the dog, whether that's a slight shock from a shock collar or pull on the lead. There's a lot of lead pullers out there. Often people will use what they call a rattle can, where they make a loud noise, or they'll clap their hands, anything to just cause stress to the dog, to say, hey, stop that. That's bad. I'm going to add a negative stimulus, so you move away from it. And what we're trying to do instead is basically only work with positive elements, and we restrict them from the dog. And as soon as you take away what the dog is doing, what the dog is getting as a success, whether it's your attention or your affection or food or something, the dog will just go, oh, that's not working. I'll try something else. And this is a really good thing because it reduces the amount of stress in the dog. It makes it, you don't have to constantly figure out how difficult to make a penalty. Because the thing about any animal brains and plant brains is that if we really want something, we'll push through a penalty. And this is actually important for game design as well. We will tolerate a huge amount of resistance if we want something on the other side. But if we feel like we're not being rewarded, we'll give up really quickly. And that's one of the reasons why we don't use those ideas. It also tends to create a situation where we're not giving the dog a lot of information. We're just giving a stress reaction. But there are lots of other people who have other theories. And there is a sense, there's what we call positive punishment and negative reinforcement. So we have a thing like, the classic example of this is you don't want your dog to jump up on the bench. So you get a bunch of big metal objects like pan lids and ladles, and you put them on a tray, and the dog jumps up. You have the tray just sticking out over the edge. The dog jumps up on the bench. There's a huge crashing noise. The dog panics. He runs away, and he goes, oh, I should never jump up on that bench before again. And that's a very low-level aversive. And I can see a place for that kind of training. I also am not... it's really important for me. One of my values and principles and ethics is that I would never abandon anyone, and neither a dog or a client. And if we were really, really stuck, it's my job to think of every possible non-aversive training system. But if that client does something and it works, it's not my job to judge them. But as this movement progresses, as always with human things, when we have a new idea and we're trying to say, hey, don't do that old idea, we tend to operate very quickly in a system of moral judgment. We are good, you are bad. And even the people even when we're not saying that, the people who feel like things are changing go, well, I feel judged no matter what you say, no matter how you say it. I feel like you're telling me I'm wrong. And the way that most humans deal with that kind of judgment is to go, well, you guys must be idiots. You guys must be moralizers. You guys must be on a witch hunt. And so what used to be, these aversive trainers are now calling themselves balanced trainers. They're suggesting that they're more reasonable. They're suggesting that trainers like me, positive trainers, are leaving dogs behind, that we're snobs, that we're moral, all these things. So I can easily imagine how one of them would design a game about my methods. So I immediately thought, what they think is that I allow dogs to do whatever they want, that I have no rules and I let dogs get away with everything. So I thought of that. There's a classic game called Cheat, where you are trying to always go higher. So there's a card that you play with a regular deck of cards. Someone plays a card and says, this is a 2, face down. They play it face down. Next person has to play a higher card. And they can, if they like, play a bunch of them and say, oh, this is 4 4s. It's like Liar's Dice, basically. You have to keep going higher. And eventually, someone will say, I think you're lying, by saying cheat. And then they turn over the card. If they weren't lying, the person who called cheat takes all the cards in the middle. If they were lying, the person who played the false card must take all the cards from the middle. And this is a really good catch-up mechanic, because then they have more cards, so they're more likely to be able to play. And it's a great game for kids and families. It's a simple bluffing game, and very low stakes, because you don't choose really when you're bluffing much. You're generally going to have to bluff at some point, and you can just let the cards decide that, which takes a lot of pressure off about when should I bluff. So simple version of that is 2 people are playing cheat, and the positive trainer, me, I can't call cheat. The other person can, because the other person can check me and correct me. And with that, very quickly, that other person can keep breaking the rules and get away with it. And I'll learn, oh, my methods don't work. That's what someone would probably work as a game about for me, to say, hey, their methods don't work because they're not correcting their dogs, but we are correcting our dogs. And something that comes up later in this book is about the word corrective design. And again, correct is a very strong word, but correction, we think of it as being like hitting you with a ruler. But I like the word of corrective design instead of games for change, because it's sort of this sense of it's interrogating how we use that word correct. Correct is certainly a word with some really dark connotations to it. It implies that there's one version of acceptability. It implies punishment. But the way that it's used here for corrective design, it's actually more about moving people towards things that are better for you, them, everyone in the world. And so I think probably this person might also see that I do like dogs, and I'm trying to correct dogs. I'm trying to get dogs to do the right thing. But they would go, your ways, they would make that cognitive error. Maybe they would let me say cheat a couple of times, but maybe not as much, but yeah, anyway, that was that exercise. That's why I struggled with it. I think it's a good exercise to think about how someone might make a game about you. It certainly helps you wire into the nature of exoticism and how we sort of think about other cultures and go, oh, they must do this, they must do that. And I think that's always important, that particularly as game designers, because as game designers see the world in systems, and when you see the world in systems, you tend to think that systems always work the same way. So you might be like, okay, the people who live in India are very spiritual, so they all have household gods or something, and they act in this way. But if you start applying those kind of lenses to yourself and your own culture, you actually get to see how systems aren't a complete picture of you. And I think that's really interesting. Like, it's very easy to apply systems to the other. And it's a great exercise to look at yourself and go, okay, what kind of things do I do in my culture? How would I map this into a board game if I thought it was all very exotic? One thing I like to point out is that board games are a lot like religion. On a regular basis, we gather, we sit around a table, we act out a ritual, we interact with a fictional universe, and we engage in ritual shaming and ritual praise. That is textbook definition of a religion if you came across that in any other culture, you might confuse it for a religious thing. It is a rite, R-I-T-E, and that's always lots of fun, And I haven't made a game about it just yet, but I would love to maybe make a game about trying to do that more for your life and going, what do I look at? What is my life? Again, I'm pretty good at going, well, everything I might do is wrong and crazy. That's just where I start from. But even with that, there's things that I miss. There's things that I go, oh, I can still I can still think about that more than I have. I have a game on my website which is called It Is Forbidden, which is inspired by games like Kingdom and Microscope. But the whole game is based on two cultures interacting. And the point of the game is that each culture asks the other for something that they think is incredibly reasonable. And the other culture says, no, we can't do that. It is forbidden. And they have to explain why. And the key of that game is to show that it's very easy to construct these kind of things. So, in one game we had some characters who saw that there were some mammal-like things, and they went and said, could we have some milk to make cheese because we're starving? And they would say, no, it's forbidden. And then the other players have to go, okay, why is it forbidden? And they go, well, animal products don't belong to us. Another game we had a thing where one group wanted to sort of get some weapons off another group, and they were like, and they saw that, and they were like, it is forbidden to give something away without getting something in return. And very quickly you get this. What you do by constructing it from that point of view is, we cannot help you no matter how reasonable that sounds. And then explaining why lets you understand why cultural clashes exist. Because we often go the other way in our brains. We start with like, well, why would you believe something that led you to that state? But that's not how it works. The belief system didn't exist. Nobody looked around and went, nobody should do X. When that conflict existed, they created something absent of that conflict. People decided, oh, it's really important for men to cover their heads, and that's our culture, and that's really important. And we didn't have a situation where somebody absolutely needed to remove their hat, because and we didn't set out to create that conflict. We had that belief first. And this comes back to what I was talking about yesterday about being sneaky, is that a lot of game designers might have go away and build a culture and then find a way to conflict it. And that's not the way to get to conflict. The better way is to go, there will be a conflict. I mean, this is one way to do it. And let's find out why. Because then and that comes back to what's in this book about empathy. It's sympathetic to go, oh, yeah, you think that's weird. You think that's different. You think that's not how we do things. I can sympathize with that. I can cognitively link myself to that. Empathy is activated differently. It's much more reactive. And so that's why we start in It Is Forbidden with, no, we're not going to do that. How dare you? And now you're already feeling it. You're like, how dare you suggest that, we give you food on a Sunday, or that we teach you how to fish, or whatever it is. And then once you have that emotion, you can justify it with creating something for your setting. And that's actually how we think as well. We think as humans as we tend to have the emotion, and then we justify it with thoughts. We're told all the time that, and it's not entirely, but we're told that you saw someone steal something of yours and that made you angry. But often what happens is the emotion happens first, and then we go, oh, why am I angry? And obviously we're reacting to stimuli, but for a lot of time we're not. That's what's one of the big things about being mentally ill, is you're not reacting to stimuli. So I'll wake up some morning and I'll just feel emotions that have no stimulus to set them off. It's just that my brain chemistry isn't working that day. So I feel afraid for no reason. I feel sad for no reason. I feel angry for no reason. And what I'll often do is in my brain go, oh, I'll think of a reason for that, because it's just easier to process. And it makes sense. It's called emotional reasoning. And often when we have an excessive emotion, we do the same thing. Instead of going, oh, I'm really frustrated by that game, it's really getting to me, we go, oh, well, that must mean, since I feel more frustrated than I think I should, or than I expected, I'll look for a reason. I'll go, well, that must mean that I'm really stupid. And then we get into a cycle as the thoughts drive emotions. Yeah, so your emotions are driving the show. And that's really important as a game designer. And that's the power of games. For the most part, stories tickle in through our cognitive searches, whereas games hit us at a very different place. And this is the thing, like if I give you a ball and say, keep that ball away from me, or I'll score a point, you're like, huh, my ball. No. Oh, sorry, doggies. I scared the doggies. You instantly engage on a visceral level. My ball, my cards. And then our minds kick in. And that's how we think, and that's why games are powerful. I very much believe that we are starting to understand that games have this incredible power to change us, and correct us in the gentle sense of that. But we have to do it well. We have to realize that this is about engaging that empathy in a clever way. And that's what a lot of these other chapters are about reminding you how to sneakily engage these parts of people's brains so that you go from empathy to higher thought. So we'll look at chapter 3 next time. That's all for today. Another little video for you. These are going to come out every week for the next 8 weeks. 6 more to come, or 7. I'll catch you next time. Don't stay up all night watching scary movies.